Clearing snow in Moscow can be a thankless task. As soon as you're making progress, a new flurry lands. Today's meeting between the UK and Russia was an icy affair. Liz Truss's warnings about harsh sanctions if Russia were to take action in Ukraine were not well received.
I'm honestly disappointed that our conversation turned out like the mute talking to the deaf. It seems like we're listening to each other, but not hearing each other. At the very least, our very detailed clarifications, on the whole, fell upon deaf ears.
Well, first of all, I certainly wasn't mute in our discussions earlier. I put forward the UK's point of view on the current situation and the fact that, as well as seeking to deter Russia from an invasion into Ukraine, we are also very resolute in pursuing the diplomatic path.
This is what worries the West. Russia is flexing its military muscle with joint drills in Belarus. NATO is concerned about Russia building up more troops along its border with Ukraine. Russia wants guarantees that NATO, which it sees as a threat, will not expand. Meanwhile, the UK and the US have committed to sending more troops to NATO countries to protect its eastern flank. But Russia still insists that it's not the aggressor. Today, the head of Russia's Secret Service chaired a discussion about Russian history, but he also has an eye on the current situation in Europe.
Russia has never had and doesn't have any aggressive plans towards Ukraine. We saw these dangerous lies spread from the other shore of the Atlantic, and these lies have been picked up in a number of Western capitals. This disinformation is dangerous, first of all for Ukraine and its citizens, as well as for European stability and security.
Building trust while building troops is difficult to do. It is seen as a positive sign that both sides are still talking. But after many weeks, many meetings and many press conferences, it can feel like they're going over old ground, with still no sign of a resolution. More Western politicians will land in Moscow over the next week. A frozen conversation is still better than all-out war. Caroline Davis, BBC News, Moscow.
Well, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been at the NATO headquarters. He's reaffirmed the UK's commitment to the alliance and a firm stance against Russia. Have a listen.
And today I've agreed with the Secretary-General a package of support to strengthen further our collective security, sending troops, planes and ships to defend NATO from north to south. But the stakes are very high. And this is a very dangerous moment. And at stake are the rules that protect every nation, big and small.
Well, our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams, who's in Kiev, says diplomacy and war games are running side by side in Ukraine.
You certainly have a sense that this crisis is far from over. British and American officials insist that the moment of maximum danger, this kind of period in mid-February, is still approaching. They see zero sign of a Russian de-escalation. In fact, if anything, they see the opposite. 30,000 Russian troops in Belarus, 6 warships passing through the Bosphorus into the Black Sea, big chunks of the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov declared off limits by the Russians. So, you know, that feels like a real sense of danger. The view often from the Ukrainians you speak to is that this is, to a certain degree, theatre. It's psychological pressure, as President Zelensky has called it, all designed to extract concessions from the West. And I think one of the fears is that this renewed emphasis on the Minsk agreements, which certainly President Macron was talking about during his visits to Moscow and here in Kiev, could be to Ukraine's disadvantage, because those were deals done when essentially Ukraine had a gun pointed at its head. And if implemented, and they are rather convoluted agreements, but if implemented the way that they were written down, it would be to Russia's advantage and to Ukraine's disadvantage. So there is a sense of apprehension that all of this military theatre, if I can call it that, could result in the West doing a deal about Ukraine's future, which doesn't necessarily follow its interests.
Yeah, and yet we continue to hear from the Americans, Tony Blinken saying in the last couple of weeks, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. So they've got these slogans out there, but no doubt nerves developing there in Kiev.
Yeah, I mean, that has been a mantra which has been expressed by every Western official and diplomat and leader for weeks now. And I think, it's not just a mantra. I think there is clearly signs that at every step of the way there is an effort to inform and engage the Ukrainian government, an awareness that this is obviously the country caught in the vice, as it were, and that it is vital to make sure that expressions of Ukraine's territorial integrity and future sovereignty and its ability to choose its future alliances, and all of that is central and is constantly being underlined. Boris Johnson did it again in Brussels today. But there is still this sort of phenomena of a debate between the West and Russia about European security, which in some ways is regarded as the bigger question. And of course, I think that is bound to leave sort of lingering suspicions and anxieties here in Ukraine, despite the constant references to that mantra.